I have been thinking lately about how games can make you feel all powerful. I mean, it is the job of a lot of games to help you get used to its systems and make you feel that you can conquer any challenge, but when I talk about being powerful in games, I mean the type of power that allows you to be above all else, to be godlike. When I say godlike, I don't mean games like The Sims or RTSs, because in those games you're more like God sitting in an office cubicle, rather than the God who unleashes his wrath and gets out more. I'm talking about games like Devil May Cry, where you play as an incredibly fast, near-invincible devil who cuts down everything in his path. I'm talking about games like Rampage, where you play as a giant monster with humanity throwing everything it has at you to try and stop you. Superman Returns looks to try and be one of those games, and why should any game try and make him any less powerful? Superman is one of the most powerful superheroes ever created. He can fly faster than the speed of sound, and he can do stuff like this. Or this. Or even this! So how does this game's portrayal of Superman's power compare to these scenes and many more scenes on top of that? Well, we're going to find out, aren't we? I'm saying this right now, the story is just bad. It is a movie game after all, so it ends up being completely half-assed. Among other things. In the beginning of the game, we get to see Superman fly. Use the triangle button to switch between jogging and soaring in the air. Flying is straightforward, all you have to do is point in the direction you want to go and then go! By hitting the R1 button, you can make Superman supposedly fly at the speed of sound. And while I can't tell whether it is the speed of sound, I can definitely tell that Superman flies really fast. And he would have to fly really fast, because this open world is an 80 by 80 square mile landscape. Yeah, despite being a half-assed movie game, Superman Returns actually contains the single largest open world map in video game history. But to be honest, I wouldn't have noticed this if I didn't read the back of the cover. Superman flies really fast to get to all the locations, so areas just zip by. And I don't really mind that though. I think out of all the powers in the game, the flying is best represented due to how fast you fly across this massive open world. After a tutorial where you save the city from meteors and test some of Superman's powers, you get captured by Mongol and taken to Warworld for a combat tutorial. The combat system heavily relies on a very generous lock-on system that lets you lock onto enemies from great distances. This is put into place to compensate for the lack of control you sometimes have over Superman's speed. The fighting is pretty generic. The game has a combo system that allows Superman to pummel enemies in a variety of ways, but I found myself only sticking to a select few combos in the Warworld level, and indeed in the rest of the game. And there really isn't any need for additional combos. If an enemy is blocking, you either use Supernova or you use a dodge strike, and if they aren't, you can pretty much do whatever you want to them, whether you want to combo them or use powers on them. The tutorial level ends with 2 boss fights. Surprisingly, you fight Mongol last. You first fight this guy named Overcast. Unlike the other villains that are represented here, he is the only one created just for the game. This could have been a cool idea, but this guy has zero background and I don't really understand his powers. I mean, the dictionary definition of overcast is the meteorological conditions in the sky. Yet, this Overcast's powers involve exploding whenever you finish a combo and turning into a giant energy thing that you have to throw cars at. He ain't all that weatherly. After defeating Padding Out Man, you get to fight Mongol, the final boss of this tutorial. While in a good game like God of War or Dark Souls would have its bosses test your recently acquired skills and ready you for the rest of the game, Mongol, one of the most famous Superman villains, is only there to teach you how to block. This devolves this boss fight into a block combo fight. He's kind of insultingly easy considering his power depicted in various other forms of media. So Superman does the thing where he returns, and he arrives back in Metropolis, and this is where the real game begins. You are now able to fly around Metropolis freely. What is there to do in Metropolis? Well, the first villain you encounter, known as Mixyezpitlik,
What mayhem are you up to now, Mrs. Pitalik?
Mayhem? Me? I'm hurt.
Lets you know that he is up to no good. He stole a bunch of Superman's stuff, and the only way he can get them back is to find 100 cats, making cats the primary collectible in this game. Considering the size of Metropolis and the speed of Superman, I ended up rarely finding any of these cats. And to be honest, I have no motivation to find them anyway, due to the fact that I have no idea if the reward is worth it. The whole thing is there just to pad out the game more. When you're flying around Metropolis, every few seconds you will be warned of danger. When you head near that danger, you will either encounter a burning building, a boss battle, or a group of enemies. You see, this game is divided into a series of these encounters called chapters. Whenever you complete an encounter, and Superman does his cheer for the 1000th time, you will gain experience, and every time the experience meter fills up, Superman will gain new abilities and would have completed the chapter. Let's talk about the encounters themselves. We start off the game fighting off villains of Metallo, which consist of a bunch of different types of robots. There is barely any strategy to beating them. If the robots are flying, or not blocking you, you can just spam heat vision on them and they go down relatively quickly. If they are blocking, you can just do a dodge strike move, then combo them. I would also say right now that their attacks are pretty weak and don't hurt me at all, but that would be implying that they only do minimal damage to Superman. It turns out they can't do any damage to Superman, because Superman cannot die in this game. That health bar in the upper left is actually the health of Metropolis, and with Superman's track record of collateral damage, it would seem that the health bar would get f***ed pretty quickly. The way that Metropolis' health works here is, as the enemies and bosses run amok, they will either destroy cars or harm civilians, and do jack to the buildings. Superman has to destroy all these enemies before they do too much damage, or else he will give up in the middle of a fight. The only way to restore Metropolis' health is to carry an injured citizen to an ambulance. I can sort of understand the reasons as to why they would implement this mechanic. One being that Superman saves people all the time and that the villains often try to hurt the ones he loves rather than him. And another reason being that Superman is practically invulnerable. For the latter, the key word is practical. Superman may be the Man of Steel, but many of the villains he fights, especially Mongol, have the capacity to really hurt him, or at least KO him. Right now, Superman is fighting robots, which could definitely do some damage to Superman, and the final boss fight against Metallo, a robot with a kryptonite heart that can be utilized into a weapon, cannot even hurt Superman. All Superman needs to do is not touch him, throw cars at him, and then infinite mass punch him in a cutscene. Oh, and by the way... And then after that, you fight Bizarro, who's practically Superman's equal, and Superman still doesn't have a health bar, and then you fight frickin' dragons. In conclusion, Superman needs a health bar, while Metropolis doesn't, because the buildings never get destroyed, and thanks to my boredom, I found out that the citizens can't die, no matter how much I accidentally hurt them. Or mostly intentionally hurt them. I mean, they might as well be made of adamantium, or vibranium coated in Minecraft obsidian. So, as I already said, after the series of chapters where Metallo ruled, you go up against Bizarro, who in the comics is a failed clone of Superman. Supposedly he escaped Cadmus alongside a bunch of dragons and demons. During these chapters you will fight demons on the ground and dragons in the sky, and you will occasionally fight Bizarro. The Bizarro fights aren't bad, but they aren't good either. They aren't the mano-y-mano boss fights you would expect from a fight with Bizarro. They do try to make the boss fights more difficult each time you encounter him, though. The first time you encounter him, he is in an open field, and he can't do that much harm to the nearby citizens. The second time he is in the streets, so he can now damage vehicles. The third time you encounter him, you have to chase him to prevent him from causing too much damage, though he isn't as capable as causing that much damage in the first place. In between boss fights, you fight demons on the ground that have a tendency to knock you on your ass whenever they feel like it. When you do enough damage to them, they turn into statues, and you have to destroy the statues before they revive themselves. In the sky you fight dragons, which are surprisingly easy considering that they are frickin' dragons. All I have to do is use Ice Breath if they are on fire, or Heat Vision if they are ice. Speaking of Superman's powers, I want to discuss how well the game has been portraying his power so far. I have already said that I thought the flying was the best represented power in the game due to how fast you can fly, but another reason it is the best is because every other power is nerfed. In order to make the combat balanced, the developers had to find a way to make it so that the players wouldn't rely on spamming Superman's powers, considering how powerful the powers are. To do this, they decided to give 90% of the enemies the ability to block all of your ranged powers. I thought this wasn't too bad at first, but the enemies started blocking the extreme versions of those powers, and I just got frustrated. I mean, the damage from this giant nuclear blast of heat vision can be completely nerfed, and I was really looking forward to reenacting that scene from Apocalypse. Unless you are fighting flying enemies, Superman's powers end up being incredibly useless compared to what one would expect from them. At least Superman's super strength is still there, and I'm glad you can pick up cars and all, but without the power of Superman's other abilities, I end up feeling less and less like Superman. For the game's near finale, Mongol and his goons come to Earth and you refight each of the bosses from the tutorial. To their credit, they are much harder than before, and they provide a half-decent challenge, though fighting Overcast is now more annoying due to his tendency to destroy everything around him whenever you finish a combo. For the game's actual finale, you actually have to take part within the events of the actual film. Since I haven't watched the film, I barely know what's going on. But from what I can tell, Lex Luthor makes a bunch of crystal fortresses come out of the ground, and they also cause a bunch of tornadoes to wreak havoc on Metropolis. Using Superman's super breath, he had to blow them away until he reached the final encounter with the Mama Tornado, for one final battle. So yeah, the final boss is a damn tornado, because the game had to follow the movie's plot somewhat, I guess. You beat the tornado by switching between heat vision and ice breath, and then you view the final cutscene. This cutscene concludes the movie's plot by jumping the shark, and then the game ends. At least it would end, except the tornado wasn't the final boss, and you still have some work to do. God damn it! The final parts of the game are only there to draw out your time playing the game. After you fill up the XP meter one more time, the rest of the game is just a bunch of random encounters. Overall, despite the many flaws with this game, I never had too many moments of frustration. This game is just repetitive and boring, though this is probably as good as Superman games are going to get now. It's been about 8 years since this game came out, and there has been no sign of any other developer making a Superman game. But to be honest, is it even possible for a proper Superman game to be made? Superman has tremendous power, and he has done some ridiculous stuff in the comics with that power. And it would require a tremendous amount of technology to allow a gamer to wield that power. Probably even more powerful than current gen systems. But in my opinion, I think I can live with not playing as the true Superman. Some of the best games ever made pits the player and his small character against large and/or godly beings as opponents, and when one defeats these clearly superior beings, a great sense of accomplishment is usually found. And I don't know if it's possible to replicate that in the Superman game. Maybe if you're fighting Darkseid, but other than that, I'm not so sure. Ah well, that's just my opinion anyway. See you next time.